My name is Chris Roper and I'm a Deputy Director at Code for Africa and also Director of ANSIA, which is our African network of Centres for Investigative Reporting, which is an affiliate of Code for Africa.
And what does Code for Africa do?
So Code for Africa is a loose federation of editorial and technology hubs in a bunch of African countries. For us mainly Tanzania, Nigeria, Kenya and South Africa, but we also work in quite a few other countries. And so Code for Africa basically facilitates a few things. One is the building of big data journalism projects or big data mining projects. And the other thing is to work with newsrooms to kind of push data journalism in African newsrooms.
And give me a couple of examples of work you've done to kind of make that come to life.
Yeah. So I guess the best example of something we've done would be the Dodgy Doctors app in Kenya and Nigeria. And that's a kind of a good example of how we work. So there we took the database of doctors in Kenya, and apparently there's a big problem with doctors in Kenya not being qualified. If you're lucky, you'll get a vet. If you're unlucky, you'll get somebody who's totally random.
Yeah.
So we took a database of doctors in Kenya and then built a simple mobile application which allowed you to check whether your doctor was real or not. That ticked a couple of boxes for us. So the one was that we would then be able to show newsrooms the benefit of building a data application, and of course there's a whole lot of journalism associated with that. So then showing them the benefit of data journalism and also to build a small revenue model into the process for them. And then the outcomes were, besides the thousands of people being able to check whether doctors were real or not, also managed to get some legislation changed in Kenya around how doctors were licensed. And also the same thing in Nigeria, managed to get legislation changed there as well. So, for example, there, doctors were then mandated to wear photo IDs. So you could check by photo whether your doctor was real or not. So that's probably the kind of sweet spot for the sort of thing we do. But we have, about 100 projects on the go. So there's a whole wide range of them, from drone journalism, sensor journalism.
You were also involved in the Panama Papers, weren't you?
Yeah, so that's kind of a pure play data journalism project. So there we ran, I think, 12 newsrooms, or worked with 12 newsrooms in about 10 African countries to teach them about how the technology layer worked, to enable them to mine the Panama Papers, which, as you know, was a vast number of documents. I've now forgotten how many millions it was. So it allowed them to mine it and do entity extraction and to work out kind of where the stories were in that vast array of data. And then also worked with them to kind of panel beat the stories. So ANSIA has an iLab, which basically is a collection of experts in various fields like prosecutorial, financial and so on. Worked with them to get the stories into a format that would match those in the rest of the world.
And the impact of that was?
Well, the impact of the Panama Papers is still ongoing. Certainly there were quite a few impacts in Africa, members of parliament in Kenya being questioned, for example, people having to resign, that kind of thing. It's still, I think the impacts are still ongoing and it's quite long form. So, the kind of big ticket impact was like the Prime Minister of Iceland having to resign. But I think it's going to be a much more longer rollout process.
And what's the impact of data journalism on the kind of the newsroom? What's the impact in many ways of the internet on the newsroom?
Yeah. So, one of our the big strands of how we work is to work with newsrooms to implement either data applications, data tools, or instances of data journalism, or data-driven journalism. The impacts are a couple of things. The first is that you can obviously tell if not a better story, but a story in a different way. The other impact is that I think, on the resources of newsrooms. So one of the things that I firmly believe is that data journalism is a way to bring the users and the readers into the story. Certainly in a lot of the territories we work, and I guess all over the world, newsrooms are running out of resources to do big stories. So data journalism is a way of allowing them to put up an instance of a story, and then the story has its own legs going into the future, which can either be because of reader user input, or the fact that the stories can actually be told from the perspective of the users. So instead of you, for example, taking a budget speech and doing a top-level analysis of it, you can do that as well, but you can also make all the data available for users so they can tell their own localized stories. So they can say, actually, this is what these figures will mean to me, or if this is a budget allocation, this is actually how much will be spent in my neighborhood on roads or schools or whatever. So those are the two, I think, certainly the two big selling points that we present to newsrooms.
And what drew you to this kind of work?
Well, I think the main thing is that you are involved in the liberation of data. So certainly one of the defenses of politicians and governments is to not make data available and knowledge available to their citizens. So this is a way of liberating data. But also, in many cases, governments are, certainly the South African government, for example, are actually pro the liberation of this data because it makes their jobs easier as well. So I think that's one of the main things that drew me personally to this, which is that you're actually opening up a whole new range of ways for people to get actionable data and to get involved in the running of their country, basically.